Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is stay quiet. But these people didn't get that memo. Here are 45 times people confessed to things so unnecessarily stupid that everyone around them was baffled by their inability to keep their mouths shut. 1. Someone confessed to their boss that they'd been doing absolutely nothing at work for 6 years. They'd been working remotely for a tech company for 6 years. They had automated all their tasks within the first few months using scripts they wrote. The automation did everything perfectly. Nobody knew. They spent their workdays watching TV, playing games, and working a second job. They made double income for years. One day they felt guilty. They walked into their boss's office and confessed everything. They explained the entire automation setup. Their boss was shocked. They showed their boss the scripts. Their boss asked why they were confessing. They said they felt dishonest. Their boss said they'd been getting paid to do nothing for 6 years. They agreed that's accurate. Their boss fired them immediately. They lost their job, their income, and their reputation. The company investigated and found the automation violated their policies. They had to pay back $100,000 in salary. They were sued for breach of contract. The lawsuit took years. They went bankrupt from legal fees. The second job they'd been working found out and fired them too. They'd had the perfect setup and ruined it. They couldn't get another job in tech because word spread. They tell people they learned honesty doesn't always pay. Friends say they learned to keep their mouth shut. The stupidity was confessing to getting paid for 6 years of nothing when nobody suspected anything, voluntarily showing your boss the evidence, losing everything because of guilt and getting sued for honesty. 2. A person confessed to stealing $20 from the cash register at work when they were actually innocent. They worked at a retail store. The cash register came up $20 short. The manager said they'd investigate. They started investigating everyone. They interviewed each employee. When it was their turn, they became extremely nervous. They thought acting nervous would make them look guilty. They decided to confess even though they didn't do it. They said they took the $20. The manager was surprised. They explained in detail how they took it. The manager asked why. They said they needed it for gas. The manager fired them immediately. They asked for a second chance. The manager said theft is grounds for immediate termination. They went home devastated. The next day, the manager called. The manager said they found the $20 in the safe. Another employee had put it there and forgot to log it. They explained they didn't actually steal it. The manager said, "Why did you confess then?" They said they panicked. The manager said they can't rehire someone who falsely confessed to theft. They asked why it matters if they didn't actually do it. The manager said it shows dishonesty and poor judgment. They were unemployed. They couldn't use the job as a reference. They told new employers they got fired. New employers asked why. They explained the false confession. Nobody wanted to hire them. They spent months unemployed. They finally got a job making less money. The stupidity was confessing to a crime you didn't commit because you were nervous, giving detailed false information, getting fired for honesty about a lie, and being unhireable because you confessed to something you didn't do. 3. Someone confessed to their spouse that they'd been faking interest in their spouse's hobby for 15 years. They'd been married for 15 years. Their spouse loved birdwatching. They went birdwatching together every weekend for 15 years. They pretended to enjoy it. They hated every minute. One day, they were having an argument about something minor. Their spouse said they never appreciate anything. They snapped and confessed they'd hated birdwatching for 15 years. They said they only went to make their spouse happy. They said they found it incredibly boring. Their spouse was devastated. Their spouse asked why they pretended for so long. They said they loved their spouse and wanted them to be happy. Their spouse said that's 15 years of lies. They argued it was loving sacrifice. Their spouse said it was dishonest. Their spouse felt their entire shared hobby was fake. Their spouse questioned what else they'd been faking. They said everything else was real. Their spouse didn't believe them. Their spouse asked about other activities. They admitted they'd also faked enjoying several other things. Their spouse felt their whole relationship was a lie. Their spouse moved into the guest room. They went to couples therapy. The therapist said the confession destroyed trust. They argued they were being honest. The therapist said the timing and delivery were terrible. Their spouse said they needed space. They separated for 6 months. They eventually reconciled, but their spouse never trusted them again. Bird watching became a source of resentment. They stopped doing activities together. The marriage was never the same. The stupidity was confessing you'd faked interest in your spouse's passion for 15 years during an argument, admitting you'd been lying for over a decade, destroying your spouse's trust, and ruining your marriage with unnecessary honesty. 4. A person confessed to their friend that they'd never actually liked them and only hung out because of mutual friends. They'd been friends for 10 years. They shared a friend group. One day they had too much to drink at a party. They got into a conversation about friendship. Their friend said they were best friends. They drunkenly confessed they didn't actually like their friend. They said they only hung out because of the friend group. They said they found their friend annoying. Their friend was shocked and hurt. They asked why they were saying this. They said they were being honest. Their friend asked what specifically they didn't like. They listed multiple personality traits they found irritating. Their friend started crying. They said they were just being truthful. Their friend left the party. The next day, they texted apologizing. Their friend said they didn't want to talk. They explained they were drunk. Their friend said drunk words are sober thoughts. The mutual friend group found out. The group was divided. Some sided with their friend. Some thought they were terrible. The friend group split. They lost half their friends. Their ex-friend told everyone they knew. Their reputation was destroyed. People at work heard about it. They became known as the person who fake-friended someone for 10 years. They tried to apologize multiple times. Their ex-friend blocked them. They lost their entire social circle. They had to make new friends. New people heard the story. Nobody wanted to be friends with them. They became socially isolated. The stupidity was confessing you'd never liked your friend of 10 years while drunk, listing all their annoying traits, destroying your entire friend group, and becoming socially isolated because you couldn't keep quiet. 5. Someone confessed to police that they were drunk driving when the officer had pulled them over for a broken taillight. They were driving home from a party. They'd had 4 beers. They were slightly over the legal limit. A police officer pulled them over. They immediately panicked. The officer walked up and said they had a broken taillight. The officer asked for license and registration. They started crying. The officer asked if they were okay. They confessed they'd been drinking. The officer hadn't suspected anything. The officer asked how much they'd had. They said 4 beers. The officer asked when. They gave exact times. The officer asked them to step out of the car. They failed the field sobriety test. They failed the breathalyzer. They were arrested for DUI. The officer later said they wouldn't have suspected DUI. They were cooperative and would have gotten a warning for the taillight. They voluntarily confessed when they could have just gotten the taillight fixed. They lost their license for a year. They paid $10,000 in fines and legal fees. They had to install an ignition interlock device. Their insurance rates tripled. They lost their job because they couldn't drive to work. They had to take public transportation. Their DUI showed up in background checks. They couldn't get jobs in their field. They told their lawyer they'd confessed immediately. Their lawyer said they'd made their job impossible. Their lawyer said never confess without being asked. They learned this lesson too late. The stupidity was confessing to drunk driving when stopped for taillight, voluntarily incriminating yourself, losing your license and job, paying $10,000, and ruining your career because you panicked. 6. A person confessed to their parents that they'd been lying about being in college for 2 years. They'd dropped out of college after freshman year. They told their parents they were still enrolled. Their parents paid tuition for 2 more years. They spent the tuition money on rent and living expenses. They spent their days working part-time and hanging out. They created fake progress reports for their parents. Their parents believed everything. They were supposed to graduate this semester. Their parents planned a big graduation party. They couldn't keep up the lie anymore. They confessed they'd dropped out 2 years ago. They explained they'd spent the tuition money on living expenses. Their parents were devastated. They asked where the $80,000 in tuition went. They explained they'd spent it on rent, food, and fun. Their parents demanded the money back. They said they didn't have it. Their parents kicked them out of the house. They had to move into a tiny apartment. Their parents cut off all financial support. Their parents told the extended family. Everyone was disappointed. Family members took sides. Some blamed them, some blamed the parents. Family gatherings became awkward. They were uninvited from holidays. They tried to apologize. Their parents said trust was broken forever. They went to therapy. The therapist asked why they confessed now. They said the graduation party forced their hand. The therapist said they should have confessed earlier. They lost their family relationships. Their parents demanded they pay back the money. They couldn't afford it. Their parents threatened legal action. The stupidity was confessing you'd stolen $80,000 in tuition and lied for 2 years, waiting until right before the fake graduation, losing your family and facing lawsuits. 7. Someone confessed to their landlord that they'd been subletting their apartment illegally for a year. They lived in a rent-controlled apartment. They'd gotten a great deal on the rent. They decided to sublet it and move in with their partner. They found someone to pay more than they were paying. They pocketed the difference, making $500 monthly. They did this for a year, making $6,000. One day, they felt guilty about breaking their lease. They confessed to their landlord they'd been subletting. They explained the entire arrangement. Their landlord was furious. They asked why they were confessing. They said they felt dishonest. Their landlord said subletting violates the lease. Their landlord evicted them immediately. Their landlord sued them for the $6,000 profit. Their landlord also demanded $10,000 in damages. They had to pay $16,000 total. The subletter had to move out immediately. The subletter sued them for breach of contract. They lost both lawsuits. They owed $25,000 total. They lost their rent-controlled apartment. Rent-controlled apartments are impossible to find. They had to pay market rate elsewhere. Their new rent was $2,000 more per month. They couldn't afford it. They had to move in with roommates. They filed for bankruptcy. Their credit was ruined. They couldn't rent apartments. They had eviction on their record. Landlords denied their applications. They ended up homeless for 3 months. They lived in their car. Friends eventually helped them. The stupidity was confessing to illegal subletting when nobody knew, losing your rent-controlled apartment, getting sued for $25,000, becoming homeless, and ruining your credit because of guilt. 8. A person confessed to their boss that they'd been taking credit for a coworker's work for 3 years. They worked in a marketing department. Their coworker was brilliant but shy. Their coworker created amazing campaigns. They presented the campaigns as their own ideas. Their coworker never spoke up. They got promoted twice based on these campaigns. They received bonuses totaling $30,000. They started feeling guilty. They went to their boss and confessed. They explained they'd been stealing credit for 3 years. They named all the campaigns they'd plagiarized. Their boss was shocked. Their boss asked their coworker. Their coworker confirmed everything. Their boss demoted them immediately. Their boss took back the bonuses. They had to pay back $30,000. They were moved to a different department. They were labeled a thief. Their reputation was destroyed. Coworkers stopped working with them. They were excluded from projects. They were passed over for promotions. They became isolated at work. They tried to apologize to their coworker. Their coworker said the damage was done. Their coworker got promoted. They stayed stuck in a low-level position. They couldn't get recommendations. They tried to leave. New employers called for references. Their boss told them about the plagiarism. Nobody would hire them. They were stuck in a dead-end job. They regretted confessing. They still owed $30,000. The stupidity was confessing you'd stolen credit for 3 years, losing your promotions, having to pay back $30,000, destroying your career, and being unhireable in your field. 9. Someone confessed to their doctor that they'd been lying about taking their medication for 10 years. They had a chronic condition requiring daily medication. They never actually took the medication. They told their doctor they took it every day. Their doctor believed them. Their condition was mysteriously not improving. Their doctor kept prescribing stronger medications. They filled the prescriptions but never took them. They had hundreds of pills stored in their closet. One day they felt guilty. They confessed to their doctor they'd never taken any of it. They showed pictures of all the accumulated pills. Their doctor was furious. Their doctor asked why they lied. They said they didn't like taking pills. Their doctor said they'd been treating them based on false information. Their doctor said they'd prescribed increasingly strong medications unnecessarily. Their doctor said this was medical fraud. Their doctor reported them to the insurance company. The insurance company investigated. They'd paid for 10 years of unnecessary prescriptions. The insurance company demanded they pay back $50,000. They couldn't afford it. Their insurance was canceled. They were blacklisted from other insurers. They couldn't get health insurance. Their condition worsened without treatment. They needed expensive treatment. They had to pay out of pocket. Medical bills bankrupted them. They tried to get insurance again. No company would accept them. They were stuck with a chronic condition and no coverage. The stupidity was confessing you'd never taken medication for 10 years, getting reported for insurance fraud, having to pay back $50,000, losing all health insurance, and bankrupting yourself with medical bills. 10. A person confessed to their neighbor that they'd been using their Wi-Fi without permission for 5 years. They moved into an apartment. They noticed their neighbor's Wi-Fi was unsecured. They connected to it instead of getting their own. They used it for 5 years, saving $60 monthly. They saved $3,600 total. One day, they felt guilty. They knocked on their neighbor's door and confessed. They explained they'd been using the Wi-Fi for 5 years. Their neighbor was angry. Their neighbor asked why they were confessing. They said they felt dishonest. Their neighbor called the police. The police said unauthorized Wi-Fi use could be prosecuted. They were charged with unauthorized computer access. Their neighbor sued them in civil court. Their neighbor demanded $5,000 for 5 years of Wi-Fi use. They lost the civil case. They had to pay $5,000 plus legal fees. They were convicted in criminal court. They got probation and a fine. They had to pay another $2,000 in fines. They had a criminal record. The criminal record showed up in background checks. They lost job opportunities. They had to pay for their own Wi-Fi. They had to pay for a lawyer. Total costs were $10,000. They'd saved $3,600 but spent $10,000 because of the confession. Their neighbor stopped speaking to them. Other neighbors heard about it. Everyone avoided them. They became the neighborhood pariah. The stupidity was confessing to Wi-Fi theft when nobody knew, getting charged criminally, losing $10,000, getting a criminal record, and becoming hated by your neighbors. 11. Someone confessed to HR that they'd been lying on their timesheets for 2 years. They worked an office job with flexible hours. They were supposed to log their hours accurately. They consistently logged more hours than they worked. They inflated their hours by 10 per week. They got paid overtime for hours they didn't work. They made an extra $20,000 over 2 years. One day they felt guilty. They went to HR and confessed. They showed HR their real hours versus logged hours. HR was shocked. HR asked why they were confessing. They said they wanted to be honest. HR fired them immediately. HR demanded they pay back $20,000. They didn't have the money. HR pursued legal action. They were sued for wage theft. They lost the lawsuit. They had to pay back $20,000 plus penalties. They owed $30,000 total. They set up a payment plan. They paid $500 monthly for 5 years. They couldn't afford their lifestyle. They had to downgrade apartments. They couldn't afford their car. They took public transportation. Their credit suffered. They couldn't get loans. They couldn't get another job in the industry. Word spread about the timesheet fraud. No company would hire them. They had to change careers. They worked minimum wage jobs. They regretted the confession daily. The stupidity was confessing to timesheet fraud for 2 years, losing your job, having to pay back $30,000, destroying your career, and working minimum wage because of honesty. 12. A person confessed to their teacher that they'd been cheating throughout college. They were in their final semester of college. They'd cheated on almost every exam for 4 years. They used hidden notes, phones, and copied from smart students. They maintained a 3.8 GPA through cheating. They felt guilty right before graduation. They confessed to their favorite professor. They explained they'd cheated in multiple classes. The professor was disappointed. The professor reported them to the dean. The dean investigated. They were called before an academic integrity board. They confirmed they'd cheated for 4 years. The board expelled them 3 weeks before graduation. They lost 4 years of work. They didn't receive their degree. They owed $100,000 in student loans with no degree. They couldn't get a job in their field without the degree. They worked retail jobs. They couldn't pay back their loans. They defaulted on student loans. Their credit was ruined. They couldn't buy a house or car. They told their parents. Their parents were devastated. Their parents had paid for part of college. Their parents felt the money was wasted. Family relationships suffered. They tried to reapply to college. No college would accept them after expulsion. They were stuck with debt and no degree. They regretted confessing. Friends who graduated got good jobs. They were stuck in poverty. The stupidity was confessing to 4 years of cheating 3 weeks before graduation, getting expelled, losing your degree, owing $100,000 with no job prospects, and ruining your entire future. 13. Someone confessed to their partner that they'd been faking orgasms for the entire 5-year relationship. They'd been in a relationship for 5 years. They'd never actually had an orgasm with their partner. They faked it every single time. Their partner believed they were sexually compatible. One night after sex, they felt guilty. They confessed they'd been faking for 5 years. They explained they'd never actually finished. Their partner was devastated. Their partner asked why they faked it. They said they didn't want to hurt their feelings. Their partner said 5 years of lies is worse. Their partner felt inadequate. Their partner questioned their entire sexual relationship. Their partner asked what else they'd been faking. They said nothing else. Their partner didn't believe them. Their partner became insecure. Their sex life became worse. Their partner was anxious during sex. Their partner couldn't perform anymore. They tried to fix it. Nothing worked. Their partner felt broken. They went to therapy. The therapist asked why they confessed. They said honesty is important. The therapist said the delivery destroyed their partner's confidence. Their relationship deteriorated. They stopped having sex entirely. Their partner resented them. They broke up 6 months later. Their partner had trust issues with future partners. They realized the confession destroyed everything. Friends said they should have handled it differently. The stupidity was confessing you'd faked orgasms for 5 years, destroying your partner's confidence, ruining your sex life, breaking up because of honesty, and leaving your partner with permanent insecurity. 14. A person confessed to their new employer that they'd lied on their resume 2 days into the job. They applied for a senior position. They lied about having a degree they didn't have. They lied about 3 years of experience. They fabricated references. They got hired based on the fake resume. They started the job. 2 days in, they felt guilty. They confessed to HR they'd lied on their resume. HR was shocked. HR asked what specifically was false. They explained the fake degree and fake experience. HR fired them immediately. HR reported them to the company they'd lied about. That company confirmed they'd never worked there. HR contacted the fake references. The fake references were real people who said they'd never heard of them. HR threatened legal action for fraud. They apologized profusely. HR said apology doesn't fix fraud. They left with nothing. They couldn't use the job on their resume. They only worked 2 days. They had a gap in employment. They applied elsewhere. Background checks revealed the fraud. Companies rejected them. Their industry is small. Word spread about the resume fraud. Nobody would hire them. They couldn't get a job in their field. They worked minimum wage. They had to explain the situation to new employers. Nobody trusted them. They were unemployable in their industry. They regretted the confession. They should have just quit quietly. The stupidity was confessing to resume fraud 2 days into a new job, getting fired and reported, becoming unemployable in your industry, and destroying your career for honesty. 15. Someone confessed to their spouse that they'd accidentally killed and buried their neighbor's cat 5 years ago. They'd hit their neighbor's cat with their car 5 years ago. The cat died instantly. They panicked and buried it in their backyard. Their neighbor thought the cat ran away. Their neighbor put up missing cat posters for months. They never said anything. 5 years later, they felt guilty. They confessed to their spouse. Their spouse was horrified. Their spouse asked why they were confessing now. They said they couldn't live with the guilt. Their spouse said they shouldn't have told anyone. Their spouse accidentally mentioned it to a friend. The friend told the neighbor. Their neighbor was devastated. Their neighbor had mourned for 5 years. Their neighbor confronted them. They admitted everything. Their neighbor was furious. Their neighbor sued them for emotional distress. They lost the lawsuit. They paid $10,000 in damages. Their neighbor spread the story. Everyone in the neighborhood knew. People avoided them. Their spouse resented them for confessing. Their spouse said they should have kept quiet. Their marriage suffered. They had to dig up their backyard. They found cat remains. The neighbor wanted them for burial. The whole experience was traumatic. They became neighborhood outcasts. People crossed the street to avoid them. They eventually moved. The stupidity was confessing to killing a cat 5 years ago, telling your spouse who told others, getting sued for $10,000, becoming neighborhood pariahs, and having to dig up cat remains. 16. A person confessed to airport security that they'd packed a knife by accident when nobody had noticed. They were going through airport security. They'd forgotten they had a pocket knife in their bag. Security scanned their bag. Security didn't notice the knife. They got through the scanner. They reached the gate and realized they had the knife. They panicked. They went back to security. They confessed they had a knife in their bag. Security was surprised. Security asked why they came back. They said they wanted to be honest. Security searched their bag. Security found the knife. Security called the police. The police questioned them. They explained it was an accident, but they confessed voluntarily. The police said they still violated security regulations. They were arrested. They missed their flight. They were detained for 6 hours. They were charged with attempting to bring a weapon on a plane. They had to hire a lawyer. Legal fees were $5,000. They were fined $500. They were put on the no-fly list temporarily. They couldn't fly for 6 months. They had to drive to business meetings. They lost client relationships. Their job performance suffered. They were reprimanded at work. They explained the situation. Their boss said they shouldn't have confessed. They could have just thrown the knife away. They realized confessing was stupid. They spent $6,500 and lost their flying privileges. The stupidity was confessing to security about a knife they didn't notice, getting arrested, paying $6,500, being put on the no-fly list, and hurting your career. 17. Someone confessed to their book club that they'd never read any of the books for 3 years. They joined a book club to make friends. They never actually read the books. They skimmed summaries online. They participated in discussions based on summaries. Nobody noticed for 3 years. One night they felt guilty. They confessed they'd never read a single book. They explained they'd been using online summaries. The group was offended. Members asked why they bothered coming. They said they enjoyed the social aspect. Members said the group is about reading and discussing. They said they still contributed to discussions. Members said their contributions were shallow. Members realized they'd never had deep insights. Members felt betrayed. The book club asked them to leave. They apologized and left. The book club members told other friends. The friend group found out. Friends were disappointed. They lost credibility in the group. People stopped inviting them to things. They tried to join other groups. Word had spread. Nobody wanted them. They became socially isolated. They realized they'd destroyed friendships over book club honesty. They should have just started reading or quit quietly. They lost their entire social circle. They spent years trying to rebuild friendships. People didn't trust them. The stupidity was confessing you'd never read books in book club for 3 years, getting kicked out, losing your friend group, becoming socially isolated, and destroying trust. 18. A person confessed to their dentist that they'd never actually been flossing despite saying they did for 10 years. They went to the dentist every 6 months for 10 years. The dentist always asked if they flossed. They always said yes. They never actually flossed. Their gums showed it. The dentist kept giving advice for their gum disease. They kept lying. One day they felt guilty. They confessed they'd never flossed despite claiming they did. The dentist was frustrated. The dentist said they'd been treating them based on false information. The dentist said their gum disease was preventable. The dentist said they'd wasted 10 years of advice. The dentist referred them to a periodontist. The periodontist said they needed gum surgery. The surgery cost $8,000. They had to pay out of pocket. Insurance only covered a part of it. They needed multiple procedures. Total costs were $12,000. They paid for surgery that could have been prevented by flossing. Their dentist was cold to them after the confession. The dentist-patient relationship was damaged. Their new periodontist asked about their oral care. They admitted they'd lied for years. The periodontist said this was frustrating. They realized confessing made everything worse. They should have just started flossing. They spent $12,000 on surgery because of neglect and honesty. The stupidity was confessing to never flossing for 10 years, needing $12,000 in gum surgery, damaging your dentist relationship, and paying for preventable procedures. 19. Someone confessed to their wedding photographer that they'd crashed and totaled the photographer's car. They hired a photographer for their wedding. The photographer left their car keys on the table. They accidentally took the keys thinking they were theirs. They drove the photographer's car drunk after the reception. They crashed the car into a tree. The car was totaled. They left it there and went home. The photographer couldn't find their car the next morning. The photographer reported it stolen. Police found the totaled car. They panicked and didn't come forward. Weeks passed. They felt guilty. They confessed to the photographer they'd crashed the car. The photographer was furious. The photographer asked why they didn't confess immediately. They said they were scared. The photographer said that's unacceptable. The photographer's insurance had already paid out for a stolen vehicle. The photographer's claim now looked fraudulent. The photographer had to deal with insurance investigation. They were sued for damages. They had to pay $25,000 for the car. They were charged with hit and run. They were charged with DUI. They were convicted. They went to jail for 6 months. And they lost their job. Their new spouse considered divorce. Their wedding was ruined by the confession. They spent years paying off debt. Their criminal record followed them. They couldn't get good jobs. The stupidity was confessing weeks later to totaling a car, facing hit and run and DUI charges, going to jail, paying $25,000, almost getting divorced, and destroying your life. 20. A person confessed to their gym that they'd been stealing towels for 2 years. They worked out at a gym. The gym provided towels. They liked the towels. They started taking one home each visit. They took towels for 2 years. They accumulated 200 gym towels at home. One day they felt guilty. They confessed to gym management. They explained they'd been stealing towels for 2 years. Management was shocked. Management asked how many they'd taken. They said about 200. Management calculated the value at $4,000. Management demanded payment. They didn't have $4,000. Management called the police. The police charged them with theft. They were arrested. They had to hire a lawyer. Legal fees were $3,000. They pleaded guilty. They were ordered to pay restitution. They had to pay $4,000 for the towels. They were banned from the gym. They had to find a new gym. The new gym was more expensive. Word spread in the fitness community. Other gyms heard about the towel theft. Nobody wanted them as a member. They had to work out at home. They sold the towels online. They made $400 from the towels. They'd spent $7,000 on legal fees and restitution. They lost $6,600. They had a theft conviction. Background checks showed it. They were embarrassed. The stupidity was confessing to stealing 200 gym towels, getting arrested, paying $7,000, getting banned from gyms, and losing $6,600 for honesty. 21. Someone confessed to their HOA that they'd been violating multiple rules for 5 years. They lived in a neighborhood with a strict HOA. They violated several rules regularly. They painted their house a non-approved color. They had unauthorized landscaping. They ran a business from home against the rules. The HOA never noticed. They got away with it for 5 years. One day they felt guilty. They sent the HOA a letter confessing everything. They detailed all the violations. The HOA was thrilled to have written evidence. The HOA fined them for each violation. Fines totaled $15,000. The HOA demanded they fix everything. They had to repaint the house. They had to redo the landscaping. They had to shut down their home business. Total costs were $30,000. The HOA placed a lien on their house. They couldn't sell without paying. They had to take out a loan. Their finances were destroyed. Neighbors found out. Some neighbors had similar violations. Those neighbors were angry they'd confessed. The confession led to increased HOA enforcement. Everyone suffered. They became the most hated person in the neighborhood. Their property value decreased. They eventually sold at a loss. They moved away. The stupidity was confessing to 5 years of HOA violations in writing, paying $30,000 in fines and fixes, getting a lien on your house, being hated by neighbors, and having to move. 22. A person confessed to their professor that they'd used AI to write all their papers that semester. They were taking an English class. They used ChatGPT to write all their papers. They got A's on every paper. The professor never suspected anything. They finished the semester with an A. Then they felt guilty. They emailed the professor confessing. They explained they'd used AI for every paper. The professor was disappointed. The professor reported them to the dean. The dean investigated. They confirmed they'd used AI. They were brought before an academic board. The board retroactively failed them in the class. The board put them on academic probation. The F dropped their GPA significantly. They lost their scholarship. The scholarship was worth $20,000 per year. They couldn't afford tuition without it. They had to drop out. They owed student loans with no degree. They tried to get the scholarship back. The scholarship committee said no. They tried to appeal. The appeal was denied. They had to work full-time. They never finished their degree. They worked minimum wage jobs. They owed $40,000 in loans. They regretted the confession. They should have just not used AI for future papers. The stupidity was confessing to using AI for all your papers, losing your scholarship worth $20,000 annually, dropping out, owing $40,000, and destroying your education. 23. Someone confessed to their therapist that they'd been lying about their progress for 2 years. They'd been in therapy for 2 years. They lied about doing homework assignments. They lied about practicing coping strategies. They lied about making progress. Their therapist believed them. Their therapist was proud of their improvements. One day they felt guilty. They confessed they'd been lying about everything. They explained they'd never done any of the work. Their therapist was disappointed. Their therapist asked why they kept coming. They said they didn't want to disappoint the therapist. Their therapist said therapy only works with honesty. Their therapist said they'd wasted 2 years. Their therapist said they'd charged them for services that didn't help. They'd paid $10,000 over 2 years. Their therapist suggested they find a new therapist. Their therapist didn't want to continue working with them. They had to start over with someone new. The new therapist heard about the lying. The new therapist was cautious. Trust was hard to build. Their mental health hadn't improved. They were back to square one. They'd wasted 2 years and $10,000. Their problems got worse. They finally committed to therapy. It took another 2 years to make real progress. The stupidity was confessing you'd been lying in therapy for 2 years, losing your therapist, wasting $10,000, starting over, and delaying your mental health progress. 24. A person confessed to their tattoo artist that they'd been planning to not pay for their tattoo. They got a large back tattoo. The session took 8 hours. The tattoo was beautiful. The artist finished. They were supposed to pay $2,000. They had a plan to dispute the credit card charge. They felt guilty when they saw how happy the artist was. They confessed their plan. The artist was furious. The artist asked why they'd confess. They said they felt bad. The artist said they still did the work. The artist demanded payment immediately. They paid the $2,000. The artist banned them from the shop. The artist posted about them on social media. The post went viral. Thousands of people saw it. Their face was visible in photos. They were identified. People recognized them. Their employer saw the post. Their employer fired them for planning fraud. They became internet famous for the wrong reason. They received death threats. They had to delete social media. They couldn't get another tattoo anywhere. Artists refused to work with them. They were blacklisted. They regretted the confession. They'd paid anyway, but destroyed their reputation. They became a cautionary tale. The stupidity was confessing your plan to commit credit card fraud before doing it. Paying anyway, getting fired, going viral, receiving death threats, and being blacklisted from tattoo shops. 25. Someone confessed to their parents that they'd been married for 3 years without telling them. They'd eloped 3 years ago. They never told their parents. Their spouse's family knew. Their parents didn't. They kept it secret to avoid drama. Their parents thought they were just dating. One day they felt guilty. They confessed they'd been married for 3 years. Their parents were devastated. Their parents asked why they hid it. They said they didn't want a big wedding. Their parents said they deserved to know. Their parents felt betrayed. Their parents questioned everything. Their parents asked what else they were hiding. They said nothing. Their parents didn't believe them. Their parents stopped talking to them. Their parents refused to meet their spouse. Their spouse felt rejected. Family gatherings were awkward. Siblings took sides. The family divided. Holidays were ruined. They tried to apologize. Their parents said trust was broken. Years passed. Years. Their parents missed their grandchildren's births. The grandchildren grew up without grandparents. The family never fully reconciled. They regretted the confession. They should have maintained the secret or told them immediately. The timing made everything worse. The stupidity was confessing to a 3-year secret marriage, destroying your relationship with your parents, dividing your family, missing years of reconciliation, and having your children grow up without grandparents. 26. A person confessed to their car insurance that they'd been lying about where they park for 5 years. They lived in a high insurance area. They used their parents' address in a low insurance area. They saved $200 monthly on insurance. They saved $12,000 over 5 years. One day they felt guilty. They called their insurance and confessed. They explained they'd been using the wrong address. The insurance company investigated. The company said this is insurance fraud. The company canceled their policy immediately. The company demanded they pay back the difference. The difference was $12,000. The company reported them to the state. Their license was suspended. They couldn't drive legally. They had to pay fines. Fines were $5,000. They had to get high-risk insurance. High-risk insurance cost $500 monthly. They couldn't afford it. They lost their car. They had to take public transportation. Their commute went from 20 minutes to 2 hours. They were late to work constantly. Their job performance suffered. They were fired. They couldn't get a new job without a car. They were unemployed for 6 months. They depleted their savings. They had to move home with their parents. The stupidity was confessing to insurance fraud, owing $12,000, getting your license suspended, paying $5,000 in fines, losing your job, and having to move home. 27. Someone confessed to their church that they'd been stealing from the collection plate for 2 years. They volunteered counting donations. They were trusted with the money. They stole small amounts each week. They stole $50 weekly for 2 years. They stole $5,000 total. Nobody noticed. One Sunday, they felt guilty. They confessed to the pastor. They explained they'd stolen $5,000. The pastor was heartbroken. The pastor called the police. The police arrested them. They were charged with theft from a religious organization. That's a more serious charge. They hired a lawyer. Legal fees were $8,000. They pleaded guilty. They were sentenced to community service. They had to pay back $5,000. They were banned from the church. Their family attended that church. Their family was humiliated. Their family had to find a new church. The story spread in the community. Everyone knew. Their reputation was destroyed. They couldn't get a job. Background checks showed theft. Employers wouldn't hire them. They worked minimum wage. They paid off their debt slowly. Their family relationships were damaged. Their children were bullied at school. The confession destroyed their life. The stupidity was confessing to stealing $5,000 from your church, getting arrested, paying $13,000 in fees and restitution, destroying your reputation, and causing your family to be humiliated. 28. A person confessed to their contractor that they'd been planning to not pay the final invoice. They hired a contractor for a kitchen renovation. The work cost $50,000. The contractor did excellent work. They owed the final payment of $15,000. They planned to claim defects and refuse payment. The contractor finished. They inspected everything. It was perfect. They felt guilty. They confessed their plan to the contractor. The contractor was angry. The contractor demanded payment immediately. They paid the $15,000. The contractor warned other contractors. Word spread in the industry. No contractor would work with them. They needed more work done. Nobody would take the job. They had to hire expensive out-of-town contractors. Those contractors charged premium prices. They paid double for future work. They needed repairs. Local contractors refused. They did repairs themselves. They did a terrible job. Their house value decreased. They tried to sell. Buyers saw the poor repairs. Offers were low. They lost money on the sale. They realized the confession cost them tens of thousands. The stupidity was confessing your plan to stiff a contractor before doing it, paying anyway, getting blacklisted, paying double for future work, doing terrible DIY repairs, and losing money on your home sale. 29. Someone confessed to their college roommate that they'd been reading their diary for 2 years. They lived with a roommate for 2 years. Their roommate kept a diary. They'd been reading it secretly for 2 years. They knew everything about their roommate. Their roommate had no idea. One day they felt guilty. They confessed they'd been reading the diary. They explained they'd read it for 2 years. Their roommate was violated. Their roommate felt betrayed. Their roommate asked what they'd read. They admitted knowing everything. Their roommate was humiliated. The diary contained private thoughts and feelings. Some entries were about them. They'd read terrible things their roommate thought. Their roommate moved out immediately. Their roommate told everyone. Friends took sides. Most sided with the roommate. They lost their friend group. They had to find a new roommate. Nobody wanted to live with them. They lived alone and paid double rent. They couldn't afford it. They had to move to a cheaper place. The cheaper place was terrible. They were isolated and depressed. Their reputation never recovered. Years later, people still remembered. The confession haunted them. The stupidity was confessing to reading someone's diary for 2 years, losing your housing situation, paying double rent, being socially ostracized, and being remembered for this violation forever. 30. A person confessed to their employer that they'd been claiming a fake dependent on their taxes. They'd been claiming a fake child as a dependent for 5 years. They got larger tax refunds. They received $15,000 more in refunds total. Their employer handled their taxes. They felt guilty one day. They confessed to their employer. Their employer was shocked. Their employer said this is tax fraud. Their employer reported them to the IRS. The IRS investigated. The IRS demanded they pay back $15,000. The IRS charged penalties and interest. Total owed was $25,000. They couldn't afford it. The IRS garnished their wages, they lost 25% of each paycheck, they couldn't pay their bills, they defaulted on loans. Their credit was destroyed, they were charged criminally, they were convicted of tax fraud. They received probation, they had a criminal record, their employer fired them. They couldn't get another job with a fraud conviction, they worked minimum wage. The wage garnishment continued for years, they lived in poverty, they filed for bankruptcy, their financial life was ruined. The stupidity was confessing to 5 years of tax fraud, owing $25,000, getting criminally convicted, losing your job, having wages garnished, and destroying your financial future. 31. Someone confessed to their vet that they'd been giving their dog human medication instead of prescribed pet medication. They had a sick dog. The vet prescribed expensive medication. They didn't want to pay. They gave their dog human medication instead. They saved $200 monthly for a year. They saved $2,400. Their dog seemed fine. One day they felt guilty. They confessed to the vet. The vet was horrified. The vet said human medication can be toxic to dogs. The vet ran emergency tests. The tests showed liver damage. The dog needed emergency treatment. Treatment cost $8,000. They had to pay. The dog survived but had permanent issues. The vet reported them to animal control. Animal control investigated. They were charged with animal cruelty. They had to go to court. They were convicted. They were fined $5,000. They were banned from owning pets. They had to give up their dog. Their family loved the dog. Their children were devastated. The dog went to a rescue. The children never forgave them. Family relationships were damaged. They'd saved $2,400 but spent $13,000. Their dog suffered because of them. The stupidity was confessing to giving your dog wrong medication, causing $8,000 in emergency vet bills, getting convicted of animal cruelty, paying $13,000 total, losing your pet, and traumatizing your children. 32. A person confessed to their hairdresser that they'd been stealing products from the salon for a year. They went to a hair salon monthly. The salon sold expensive hair products. They stole one product each visit for a year. They stole $100 worth of products. Nobody noticed. One day they felt guilty. They confessed to their hairdresser. Their hairdresser told the owner. The owner called the police. The police charged them with theft. They were arrested. They had to hire a lawyer. Legal fees were $4,000. They pleaded guilty. They paid restitution of $100 to $200. They were fined $2,000. They were banned from the salon. Their hairdresser was the only one who could do their hair right. They had to find someone new. Every new hairdresser ruined their hair. They spent thousands fixing bad haircuts. The salon owner told other salon owners. They were banned from multiple salons. They had limited options. Their hair looked terrible for years. They became self-conscious. They wore hats constantly. People noticed and commented. They were embarrassed. The theft conviction showed up in background checks. They lost a job opportunity. The stupidity was confessing to stealing $200 in products, paying $7,200 in fees and fines, getting banned from salons, having terrible hair for years, and losing a job opportunity. 33. Someone confessed to their professor that they'd hired someone to take their online exams for 3 years. They were taking online classes. They hired someone to take their exams. They paid $200 per exam for 3 years. They spent $6,000 total. They maintained a 4.0 GPA. They were about to graduate. They felt guilty. They confessed to their professor. The professor was disappointed. The professor reported them immediately. The university investigated. They confirmed the cheating. They were expelled 2 months before graduation. They lost 3 years of work. They didn't receive their degree. They owed $90,000 in student loans. They had no degree and massive debt. They couldn't get a job in their field. They worked retail. They defaulted on loans. Their wages were garnished. They earned minimum wage. The garnishment took 25%. They couldn't afford to live. They moved home with parents. They were 25 years old living at home. Their parents were disappointed. Their future was destroyed. Friends graduated and got careers. They were stuck in retail. The confession ruined their life. The stupidity was confessing to 3 years of exam fraud 2 months before graduating, getting expelled, losing your degree, owing $90,000, working minimum wage with garnished wages, and destroying your future. 34. A person confessed to their spouse that they'd been pretending to be allergic to their in-laws' cooking. They didn't like their mother-in-law's cooking. They pretended to be allergic to certain ingredients. They avoided eating at in-law dinners for 5 years. Their mother-in-law accommodated them. Their mother-in-law made special dishes. One day they felt guilty. They confessed to their spouse. They explained they'd been lying about allergies. Their spouse was furious. Their spouse told their mother. Their mother-in-law was devastated. Their mother-in-law had spent 5 years accommodating fake allergies. Their mother-in-law felt disrespected. Their mother-in-law stopped speaking to them. Family gatherings became hostile. Their spouse's siblings took their mother's side. They were excluded from events. Their spouse was caught in the middle. Their marriage suffered. They went to couples therapy. The therapist said the lie was hurtful. Their mother-in-law demanded an apology. They apologized repeatedly. Their mother-in-law didn't accept it. Years passed. The relationship never recovered. Their children missed out on grandparent time. Their spouse resented them. The marriage struggled. The stupidity was confessing to 5 years of fake food allergies, devastating your mother-in-law, destroying family relationships, damaging your marriage, and having your children miss out on family. 35. Someone confessed to their bank that they'd been exploiting an ATM error for 6 months. They found an ATM glitch. The ATM gave extra money. They exploited it for 6 months. They took $10,000 extra. The bank never noticed. One day they felt guilty. They went to the bank and confessed. They explained the ATM glitch. The bank investigated. The bank said this is theft. The bank demanded they pay back $10,000. The bank pressed charges. They were arrested for theft. They hired a lawyer. Legal fees were $6,000. They pleaded guilty. They paid back $10,000. They were sentenced to probation. They were fined $5,000. Total costs were $21,000. They had to borrow money. They went into debt. Their credit was ruined. They had a theft conviction. Background checks showed it. They lost job opportunities. They couldn't get loans. They couldn't buy a house. Their financial future was destroyed. They regretted the confession. They should have just stopped using the ATM. The stupidity was confessing to exploiting an ATM glitch, owing $21,000, getting a theft conviction, destroying your credit, losing job opportunities, and ruining your financial future. 36. A person confessed to their apartment building that they'd been using someone else's storage unit for 2 years. They lived in an apartment building. They found an unlocked storage unit. They used it for their stuff for 2 years. They saved money on renting their own. The owner never noticed. One day they felt guilty. They confessed to building management. Management was angry. Management contacted the storage owner. The owner was furious. The owner sued them for unauthorized use. They lost the lawsuit. They had to pay $3,000 in damages. Their items were thrown out. Some items were valuable. They lost $5,000 in belongings. Management evicted them. They had eviction on their record. They couldn't rent apartments. Landlords denied their applications. They had to live in substandard housing. The housing was expensive. They paid more for worse conditions. They tried to clean their record. The eviction stayed for 7 years. They suffered for years. The stupidity was confessing to using someone else's storage unit, getting sued for $3,000, losing $5,000 in belongings, getting evicted, and being unable to rent decent housing for 7 years. 37. Someone confessed to their dentist that the teeth they claimed to need fixed were actually fine. They wanted a day off work. They called their dentist claiming severe tooth pain. The dentist scheduled an emergency appointment. They went to the appointment. The dentist examined them thoroughly. The dentist found nothing wrong. The dentist was about to do unnecessary procedures. They felt guilty. They confessed they'd lied. The dentist was furious. The dentist had cleared their schedule for this emergency. The dentist had turned away real emergencies. The dentist banned them from the practice. They needed a new dentist. No dentist would take them. The old dentist told other dentists. They were blacklisted. They had to drive an hour to find a dentist. The new dentist was expensive. They developed real tooth problems. Getting care was difficult. They suffered with pain. They regretted the confession. They should have just canceled. The stupidity was confessing to faking a dental emergency, getting banned from your dentist, being blacklisted, having to drive an hour for care, and suffering when you developed real problems. 38. A person confessed to their manager that they'd been working a second job during work hours for a year. They worked remotely. They worked a second job during work hours. They managed both jobs for a year. They made double income, nobody knew. One day they felt guilty. They confessed to their manager. Their manager was furious. Their manager fired them immediately. Their manager told the second employer. The second employer fired them too. They lost both jobs. They lost double income. They had no income. They couldn't pay bills. They burned references. Neither job would recommend them. They couldn't get new jobs. They applied everywhere. Nobody would hire them. They depleted savings. They lost their apartment. They moved home. They were unemployed for 8 months. They finally got a low-paying job. They never recovered financially. The stupidity was confessing to working 2 jobs simultaneously, getting fired from both, losing all income, burning all references, becoming homeless, and destroying your career. 39. Someone confessed to their ex that they'd been lying about returning their belongings 2 years ago. They broke up with their ex. Their ex asked for belongings back. They said they'd mailed everything. They actually kept some items. 2 years passed. They felt guilty. They confessed they'd kept items. Their ex was angry. Their ex demanded the items back. They'd sold some items. They couldn't return those. Their ex sued them. They lost. They had to pay $2,000. Their ex told mutual friends. Friends took sides. They lost friends. Their ex posted about it online. The post went viral. They were identified. People harassed them online. They received threats. They had to delete social media. Their mental health suffered. They went to therapy. Therapy costs added up. They regretted the confession. The stupidity was confessing to keeping your ex's belongings 2 years later, getting sued for $2,000, losing friends, going viral, receiving threats, and damaging your mental health. 40. A person confessed to their study group that they'd been sabotaging everyone's notes for a semester. They were in a competitive program. They sabotaged classmates' shared notes. They added wrong information. Everyone failed tests. Nobody knew who did it. The semester ended. One day they felt guilty. They confessed to the group. The group was furious. The group reported them to the dean. The dean investigated. They confirmed it. They were put on academic probation. They were required to retake the class. They had to pay for the class again. The classmates sued them. They lost. They had to pay damages. Total costs were $8,000. Word spread. Nobody would work with them. They became isolated. They struggled in classes alone. Their grades suffered. They dropped out. They wasted 2 years. The stupidity was confessing to sabotaging classmates, getting put on probation, paying $8,000, becoming isolated, and dropping out. 41. Someone confessed to their family that they'd been lying about having a job for 6 months. They lost their job 6 months ago. They didn't tell their family. They pretended to go to work daily. They spent days at coffee shops. They used savings to pay bills. Their savings ran out. One day they confessed. Their family was shocked. Their family asked why they lied. They said they were embarrassed. Their family was hurt. Their family had been supportive. They could have helped. Instead, they were deceived. Trust was broken. Their family gave them money reluctantly. Family relationships were damaged. They found a job. The job paid less. They struggled financially. Their family never fully trusted them again. The stupidity was confessing to 6 months of job loss lies, breaking family trust, and damaging relationships permanently. 42. A person confessed to their gym that they'd been bringing in outside guests illegally for a year. They had a gym membership. They brought friends for free. This violated rules. They did it for a year. Nobody noticed. One day they felt guilty. They confessed. The gym was angry. The gym calculated 50 unauthorized visits. The gym charged them $1,000. The gym banned them. They had to find a new gym. The new gym was more expensive. They paid $50 more monthly. Over years, they paid thousands more. The stupidity was confessing to sneaking in friends, paying $1,000, getting banned, and paying thousands more at expensive gyms. 43. Someone confessed to their neighbor that they'd been using their electricity for a year. They ran an extension cord from their neighbor's outlet. They used their neighbor's electricity for a year. Their neighbor's bill increased. Their neighbor didn't know why. One day they felt guilty. They confessed. Their neighbor was furious. Their neighbor calculated $1,200 in stolen electricity. Their neighbor sued them. They lost. They paid $1,200 plus legal fees. Total was $3,000. Their neighbor reported them to police. They were charged with theft. They were convicted. They got probation. They had a criminal record. The stupidity was confessing to stealing electricity. paying $3,000, getting a criminal record, and destroying neighborly relations. 44. A person confessed to their friend that they'd been secretly dating their friend's crush for 6 months. They knew their friend liked someone. They started dating that person secretly. They hid it for 6 months. One day they felt guilty. They confessed to their friend. Their friend was devastated. Their friend felt betrayed. Their friend ended the friendship. The entire friend group found out. Everyone took sides. Most sided with their friend. They lost their friend group. The relationship with the crush ended. They were left with nothing. The stupidity was confessing to secretly dating your friend's crush, losing your best friend, losing your friend group, and ending the relationship. 45, and finally, someone confessed to their elderly grandmother that they'd been stealing her pain medication for 3 years and selling it. They visited their grandmother weekly. Their grandmother had prescription pain medication. They stole pills during each visit for 3 years. They sold the pills. They made $15,000. Their grandmother's pain wasn't properly managed. Their grandmother suffered. Doctors couldn't figure out why medication wasn't working. One day they felt guilty. They confessed to their grandmother. Their grandmother was heartbroken. Their grandmother called their parents. Their parents were horrified. Their parents called the police. The police arrested them. They were charged with drug theft and distribution. These are serious felonies. They hired a lawyer. Legal fees were $20,000. They pleaded guilty. They were sentenced to 3 years in prison. They went to prison. They lost 3 years of their life. They lost their job. They lost their apartment. They lost everything. Their criminal record was permanent. Drug felonies are the worst on records. Nobody would hire them after prison. They couldn't get housing. They couldn't get loans. They were effectively unemployable. They worked under-the-table jobs. They lived in poverty. Their grandmother died while they were in prison. Their grandmother died disappointed in them. They never got to apologize properly. Their family cut them off. Siblings wouldn't speak to them. Parents were ashamed. Family events excluded them. They were alone. Years passed. Their life never recovered. The drug conviction followed them forever. Every job application asked about felonies. They had to check yes. Interviews ended immediately. They worked minimum wage when they could find work. They were homeless multiple times. They relied on shelters. Their health deteriorated. They couldn't afford health care. They developed chronic issues. They had no support system. Friends from before abandoned them. They tried to make new friends. People found out about their past. They were rejected repeatedly. They lived with constant regret. They destroyed their grandmother's final years. They destroyed their own life. They spent decades suffering. The $15,000 they made was gone immediately on legal fees. They netted negative $5,000 plus 3 years in prison, plus a destroyed life. They tell people their life ended with that confession. Nobody has sympathy. The stupidity was confessing to 3 years of stealing your grandmother's pain medication and selling it, getting 3 years in prison, destroying your grandmother's final years, getting a drug felony record, becoming permanently unemployable, losing your entire family, being homeless multiple times, and destroying your entire life because you felt guilty. These confessions prove that sometimes honesty isn't the best policy. Timing matters enormously, and some things are better left unsaid. Sometimes the guilt of keeping a secret is far less damaging than the consequences of revealing it. Hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed these confession fails, and remember, before you confess something, ask yourself if the confession will make things better or destroy your life. These people learned that lesson the hard way,